Okay, we're here today with John Green and his wife Irene, and John's going to start off introducing himself to us and tell us about his youth, and then I'm going to let Irene introduce herself, and they'll tell us also how they met and so on, and then we'll move on from there. So, John, can you tell us your name, what year you were born, and where you were born?
Okay, my name is John Green. I was born here in Evansville, out on Monroe Avenue, at home. It was January 27th, 1926. And we lived there for a short period, and then we moved out in Howell. It was called Howell at that time, on Delmar. Then we moved over on Austin Avenue for a few years. And then we moved out on Middle Mount Vernon Road, and when I was in the second grade, and I went to white school. It's the name of the school, not for white people. And went there until seventh grade, and moved into Teacuple and lived in the same block as Teacuple School. And went seventh and eighth grade there, and Irene was in the same eighth grade class as I was, but we were just in the same class. And I was the first patrol boy there because I was in the Boy Scouts. None of the other kids were in that, and they started that program at that time. And I went to Rice High School for 2 years, and then I went to Mechanic Art, and went a year and a half there. In the machine shop, learned all kind of machines, and then the second senior year was advanced machines, lathe or milling machine, all that kind of stuff. And right after it started, the teacher asked me if I wanted to go to work at Servel, and he would give me credit for the shop, which other guys had been doing that. So I told him I would, and making 64 cents an hour, and I'd go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning and work till noon, and then I'd go over to Mechanic Art School, which is where the old North is now. Used to be, that is. And let's see, where I went to Mechanic Art, okay. And while I went to work at Servel, I was an inspector for precision inspection on briefcases for 20 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. They come in a real rough thing, it's about that long, and it had a real big face plate, about that thick, about a 4x6 plate, real smooth. We'd put our thing on there to inspect them. And we'd check, every cut had to be inspected, and we did that until that contract ran out in a few months, and then they transferred me to the wing plant where they made the P-47 wings. And I was inspecting the wheels and the down lock and up lock and the aileron rods, all that kind of stuff. Did that. Well, I skipped when I got out of high school. I only went 3.5 years, and they gave me. I had enough credits that I didn't have to go the other half year. So when we got out, I went back to the Wright's graduation and graduated from there. And then right after that, I was 18 years old, so I told the guy at Mechanic Art that I needed to get out in 3.5 years because I was going to be going in service. Well, as soon as I got out, I joined the the Navy. Went out to the Armory and went through the physical for the Navy. When it got done, they turned me down because they said I had scars on my lungs. So I went back to work at Servel, and worked there until December on the wings and stuff. And then in December, the Army drafted me then. So I went up to Camp Atterbury and processed there. And then they sent me down to Little Rock at Fort Robertson. I was there for 17 weeks, basic. And then from there, I got delay en route and stopped at home on the way to Fort Meade, Maryland. And then went to Fort Meade, Maryland, and then from there to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. And that's where they sent the guys out from. And then we got on a troop train and went to the dock there in New York. Got on the SS Brazil, which used to be a big luxury liner for Brazil, but it was a troop ship then. And we were in a great big convoy. Everywhere you looked was ships. And we was on there for 15 days. Got seasick every day. And then we landed in Le Havre, France on May 8th. Get my dates mixed up. May 8th, 1945, which is the same day the war ended. So, but they put us in a Lucky Strike camp for a day or two, and then we got on trucks, went up to up in Germany, and then went to another truck and went up to Czechoslovakia, and I joined the 2nd Division there, the 9th Infantry Regiment, Company I. And we were there for probably a couple of months. And then the Army decided the other guys were all getting discharged if they had enough points. But they decided to send the whole 2nd Division back and retrain them to go to the Pacific. So we got on our ships and come back to Boston, Massachusetts, Camp Miles Standish, and stayed there a day or two, and then went back to Camp Atterbury, and was there another day, and then got to come home for a delay en route, going to Camp Swift, Texas, which is right outside of Austin. And while I was home for that 30-day delay, the war ended in Japan. So we went on down to Texas, and they were separating the regular army from the draftees, so they took me and a bunch of other guys out and sent us up to Camp Chaffee, Arkansas, which is right out of Fort Smith. So they made me an ambulance driver. And I did that for quite a while, and then the camp was in the process of being closed down. So, and they were processing a lot of guys for discharge. And I worked in ambulance and dispensary quite a bit. And then that ran out. Then they made me a company clerk. So I did that for probably a couple of months. Did that and drove a truck around and whatever they needed. And then they sent me for discharge from there up to Fort Sheridan, Illinois. And when I got to Fort Sheridan, I met this buddy of mine that I was real good buddies with. Thurman Highsmith was his name. I met him down at Camp Robertson, and we were buddies all along. And he was there when I got it, and we met and we come home together. Also, there was another guy named Walter Bossy, who left the same time I did, and went down to Camp Robertson, the same routine I went to, but different companies. And then I met him up there, and we were all coming home discharged together. But then I come home, and then me and my good friend lived across the street from me. We were real good buddies. We decided we was going to go to college on the GI Bill. So we went one semester and neither one of us had had any college preparatory courses. We all had industrial. So they just advised us to take something else. And so we signed up for a school in Chicago, commercial trade school, where we learned to be a mechanic. So we went through that for I don't know how many months, and then came back to Evansville, and I went back to work for Servel then for a while, and then in 1948 I went to work for Metropolitan Life Insurance Company and worked for them for 32 years, and then retired at age 55. You could retire, which I did, and then after that I never had a job. But I had a bunch of apartments that I had accumulated, and that was my job, just taking care of them. And over a period of time, I had probably at least 60 coming and buying and selling them. And in the meantime, I forgot to tell you, in 1949, well, I met Irene again in 1946, right after I got out of service. And then we started going together. And we went until July 14th of 1949. We got married and moved out here on 3120 North 12th Avenue. We bought a brand new house. They just finished them. I could buy that house for $40 a month, and we were in a furnished apartment paying $10 a week, so better buy the house, so we did that. And didn't have any furniture, so we went down to Finks and bought all new furniture. Didn't have to move in because they moved us in that way. In the meantime, I was still working for Met. And then in September 27, 1952, Janie was born, Jane Ellen Bennett now. And then 18 months later, we had twins. In April 8, 1954, 18 months apart, so we had our hands full.
Yeah.
And then we had too many people for a little house we had, so decided to build onto that. So I built on a pretty good sized room on the side of the house. And we lived there for 19 years. And then we bought a house on Hathaway, 1401 Hathaway. Lived there 19 years. It's out by the old white school. And then after 19 years, we bought this house. Can you see this picture up here?
Mm-hmm.
In your camera? Our next house we bought was that one that you got the picture of. It's a 20-room house with 7 acres of land. And just the two of us moved everything we had except the big stuff in there. And then we did a lot of work. I put a lot of roofs and all that stuff on. I did most of my own maintenance and so on. But I need to go back when I was working for Met in 1950. We were on a trip with Mom and Dad out west. We was out in Wyoming when the war broke out over in Korea, and didn't think nothing about it. But when I come home, in October I got an order to report because I was in the reserve. So I went back to Camp Atterbury, and then they sent us to Fort Lewis, Washington for refresher course because everybody was reserves. Most of them sergeants and so on, and I was just a little old corporal. But anyhow, we went there for 2 weeks of training, and then we went to Fort Lawton, which was another port of embarkation, and I did KP and all that routine stuff that they made guys do. And then one day a sergeant came in the barracks and said, anybody wants to stay 30 days, they can can volunteer for KP. So me and a bunch of other guys volunteered because they was fighting over in Korea. So then I went and called Irene. She came out there then a few days later. And we got to stay there until almost the end of January. And she came back home. And then I went to Korea. Went to Canada, Vancouver, and got on a bus. No, wait a minute. We took a bus up there and got on an airplane and went up to Anchorage, Alaska, and stopped there for fuel and so on. Then went to the Aleutians at one of the islands. Had stopped there. Then we went on to Tokyo and was there 2 or 3 days, and then got on a train, went down to Sasebo, and that's where they sent the guys over to Korea. So we got on a cattle boat and went across there to Busan, and then went on up to join the unit that's going to assign me to, which was the 2nd Combat Engineers. And while I was in Japan, they were processing guys and giving them new MOS numbers. And they gave me one. I was a tank driver. And of course, when I got to the company, the captain was interviewing everybody. And I told him I never had been in a tank. And they said, that's all right, we don't have any anyhow. They all got knocked out. But the one that did have had bulldozer blades on them, and was ready for engineers, you know. So after the interview, and he wanted to know what all I could do. He wanted somebody that could type, and somebody that was a Protestant, and somebody that could drive. So he made me the chaplain's assistant, because I had all the requirements that they wanted. So I did that all the time I was there for Chaplain Buckland was my main one, till he got called home, and then I had Captain Jennings, and stayed there until November, and then we started back home, went up to Incheon, waited there a few days for a ship, and none showed up, so put us back on a train. Looked like the 48, only worse, and went back to Busan, and then went back to Sasebo. And when we landed there, they gave us what's called shakedown. Couldn't take anything out of Korea. So we went from the boat directly to a big building, and they said, take everything you got, store it in this pile, your toilet, everything you got, except your personal, and give us a little ditty bag. Put your personal in there, go take a shower, come out the other end, you're getting new uniforms and new everything. So he did that. And then, let's see, what did we do? From there, we got on a ship, and the ship had a great big hole in it, about 20 foot square or more. And the Maritime Commission wouldn't let them go across, so we went on up to Yokosuka, I think, in Japan, and they had a big base there, and they had these Japanese guys welding great big plates on there. For 4 days and nights they welded plates on there, and then they let us go across. And then we were on, it was a Liberty ship, and we went on that to San Francisco, and went up to the camp there it was in Philadelphia, California. We was there for 2 or 3 days, and then I had met another guy that went over with me, Gene Gines was his name, and we had met coming back, and we came back together. And then we went up to Camp Carson, Colorado on a train and got discharged there. Then got another train and come on back home in. Let's see, that would have been in 51. We got home about December 51. And then right after that, I went back to work for Metropolitan. So you got most of that, I guess. And
All right.
I am Irene Green. Married John Green when I was 19 years old. 23.
in 1949,
When
You were 23.
23 years old.
in time where you was born,
I was born in Francisco, Indiana, to Walter and Dora Suit, S-U-I-T-T. And he was, my dad was from North Carolina and came here with some family and met my mother, and they were wed here, and he has lived here until he passed away. But anyway, I did get to go to North Carolina and meet my folks after I was grown. And I had a brother, Virgil, was 4 years younger than me, and my sister, Lillian, was 3 years older than I am. And so I was a middle kid, and so that was a lot of fun. Get the cake both ways. So anyway, I grew up in Francisco area. I went to Oakland City School also. I wanted to say that when we lived at Oakland City, when we lived there, we moved to Evansville, and that was when I met John, and he was going to
1939.
1989. I met him. We were in the 8th grade.
No, you got the wrong year, hon.
You told me
1939.
1939. And then, excuse me, 1939, okay. We went to Teacup School together because he was in that class when I got here in Evansville on that Monday morning. And we went to the full year together and graduated. He went to Wrights, and I went to Central because during the time my folks decided that they needed to move because we hadn't found the proper place to live for a longer period of time, which we were looking for. And so John went to Wrights, and when we moved, it was within a week or so, I started to work at
St.
Central.
Mary.
Well, anyway, that's when I finished my school, was at Central, and then I got a job with
Western Union.
Western Union. I'm sorry for the problem, but anyway, I'm still trying. And that's about the end. Well, of course, after so long time, we got married, and because he was a nice person, his family was nice, and they were all Tennessee people, and the Tennessee people are very friendly people. But anyway, we got to know each other real well, and I enjoyed his family as well as my own. Anyway, after I went to Central and graduated there, and went to the
Western Union?
Western Union. I worked there for, I think it was 5 years.
Till you got married.
And during that time, we were married. I married John Green, and we had a nice life out on a new street that they built it so they could put some inexpensive homes out there for all these people who were in the Korean War and the others as well. And so we had a new area in our community, and we enjoyed that very much. It was only about a 4-block long on our street, and made a nice place for children to play because it was a dead-end street, and well, there was an outlet, but it was still just mostly traffic for our street. And we lived there for,
19.
I believe it was
19.
19 years.
19 years. 19 years. And then we moved
6
over
years.
to, John had remodeled our house and added on to it so we could stay there a little longer because we had some great neighbors. But anyway, this one lady said, you can have some more of my ground if you will not move away and just stay here. And so anyway, that decided us, we liked them too, so that decided that we would stay there. And then, I have to think of what we did next. Well, when we moved to Hathaway on Red Bank Road, while we were still on 12th Avenue, though, we had our children. Had Jane Ellen, was born in September, and
1952.
22.
52.
52. And the twins were born 18 months later. And they are, Donna Sue was the oldest, born first. And Deborah Lou was the second one. And she weighed twice as much as Donna. So when they were born, she was almost like two babies. She weighed 7 pounds and 1 ounce. And Donna only weighed 4 pounds, 10 ounces. And so that made for three little girls, because Janie wasn't too old yet, and I carried her around a lot. So I kept all this fat off of me until I got.
He wants to know what you did when I left for service. We lived on 12th Avenue.
I'm talking about me. I'll cut it off.
Okay.
All right.
Now,
Mr. Green, is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
well, I'll tell you a little story. When, of course, I slept in the same tent with the chaplain because I had to be on duty with him if he wanted to go somewhere. But anyhow, it was my job to keep the little gas stove going because it was cold at night. And every day I'd go down to the motor pool and get 4 5-gallon cans of gasoline and bring them up and put them behind the tent. We had a little tube hooked to one of those cans. We turned upside down, hooked a tube to it, and it would run into this little stove and we'd burn gasoline. Well, I got a couple of times, went out there and one of my cans was empty. So I said, well, I'll take care of that. So the next day, I filled one of them full of water. And I put it there where I thought the guy was stealing them. So the next morning, chaplain went to breakfast. They come back and he said, boy, there's a bunch of officers are really mad. They got cold last night. The fire went out. And their houseboy had been coming over and stealing my gas, and they just switched it to him. So he didn't do that anymore. And of course, I didn't put more of that either.
Okay.
And another story I want to tell you about before I got there, when this friend of mine, Bob Grass, he was in World War II and went back to Korea in the 1st Marine Division. And he was in the group of guys that got not captured, but in Chosin Reservoir. They couldn't get out of there because of the bridge had been knocked out. So the engineers, combat engineers, not arguing it, but another one went up there and put a big bridge in, and it lacked 7 feet, being enough to go all the way across. So then they got the bright idea of taking a bunch of frozen Chinese guys and taking the bulldozer and pushing them in that cavity, and they filled it up with them, and then they could just drive right on out. Now, Bob told me that story quite a few years ago. Of course, he's been dead here for several years. But anyhow, I got a book right there on the table. It's got that same story, identical in it. So, I just want to let you know that.
All right. All right. Well, we appreciate John Green and Irene Green taking the time to share their story with us, and we thank you very much.
Okay?